The pill bottle rolled out of my 16-year-old son's backpack like a grenade with the pin pulled. OxyContin. Prescribed to Derek Mitchell, my ex-wife's husband. My blood turned to ice as I stared at Jake's trembling hands, watching my boy crumble before my eyes. "Dad, please don't tell Mom," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Derek said it would help with my anxiety about the divorce. He said you'd never understand because you weren't there." Before we dive deeper, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more intense betrayal and revenge stories. And let us know where you are listening in the comments. 24 hours earlier, everything seemed normal. Well, as normal as life gets when you're a divorced Green Beret trying to maintain a relationship with your teenage son. Jake had been living with his mother Linda and her new husband Derek for 3 years now, ever since our divorce was finalized. I got him every other weekend and Wednesday dinners, court-ordered scraps of fatherhood that never felt like enough. That Saturday morning, Jake seemed different when I picked him up, quieter than usual. His eyes were glassy, and he moved like he was underwater. I chalked it up to teenage mood swings and the awkwardness that still existed between us since the divorce. Linda had made sure of that, painting me as the absent military father who chose his career over his family. We went to our usual spot, Tony's Diner on 5th Street. Jake barely touched his pancakes, just pushed them around his plate while staring out the window. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, watching him closely. Something in my gut, that same instinct that had kept me alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan, was screaming that something was wrong. "Just tired, Dad. School's been stressful." His voice was flat, emotionless. This wasn't the Jake I knew. My son was vibrant, curious, always asking questions about my military service, about life, about everything. This hollow shell sitting across from me was someone else entirely. After breakfast, we headed back to my apartment. I'd planned to help him with his history project about World War II. Jake loved hearing my stories about military strategy, and it was one of the few ways we still connected. But as soon as we walked through my door, Jake collapsed onto my couch and was asleep within minutes. That's when I saw his backpack sitting by the door, unzipped and messy. Jake was usually meticulous about his belongings, a trait he'd inherited from me. But contents were spilling out, crumpled papers, a broken pencil, and something that caught my eye. A small orange prescription bottle, half hidden under his math textbook. My hands were steady as I picked it up, the same steadiness that had served me well in countless dangerous situations. But inside, my world was imploding. Derek Mitchell. The name on the label might as well have been written in my son's blood. 30 pills prescribed, only 12 remaining. The date showed it had been filled just a week ago. I walked back to the living room where Jake was still sleeping on my couch. His breathing was too deep, too heavy for natural sleep. My training kicked in as I observed him. Dilated pupils, slowed heart rate, the pale complexion. All signs of opioid use. "Jake!" I shook his shoulder gently. "Son, wake up." His eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. It took him several seconds to remember where he was. When his gaze landed on the pill bottle in my hand, the color drained completely from his face. "Dad, I can explain, don't." My voice came out harder than I intended, and Jake flinched. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to use the tone I'd used with a scared soldier, not an interrogated enemy. "Just tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" The story that came tumbling out of my son's mouth was worse than anything I'd faced in combat. Derek had started giving Jake anxiety medication about 4 months ago, right after Jake had a panic attack at school. Linda had been working double shifts at the hospital, and Derek had positioned himself as the understanding stepfather who just wanted to help. He said Mom was too stressed to handle it. Jake whispered, his voice breaking. He said the pills would help me feel normal again. Help me not think about you and Mom fighting all the time. Each word was a knife twisting in my chest. My ex-wife's husband, a man I barely knew, a man who'd slipped into my family while I was deployed, had been systematically drugging my child. "Jake, look at me." I waited until his eyes met mine. "This is an anxiety medication. This is OxyContin. It's an opioid. It's addictive, and it's dangerous. But Derek lied. The words came out like bullets. And we're going to fix this. Right now. Jake started crying then. Real tears of fear and shame and relief all mixed together. Dad, please don't call Mom. Derek said if anyone found out, he'd tell everyone I was a drug addict. He said I'd get kicked out of school, that I'd ruin Mom's reputation at the hospital. I pulled my son into my arms, holding him tight as he sobbed against my chest. In that moment, every protective instinct I'd ever had, as a father, as a soldier, roared to life. Derek Mitchell had made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd messed with a Green Beret's child. As I held Jake, my mind was already working, planning, calculating. This wasn't just about getting my son clean. This was about a predator who had infiltrated my family and was systematically destroying my child. And if Derek thought he could hide behind my ex-wife's skirts and my son's shame, he was about to learn what 20 years of military training could do to a man who threatened what I loved most. The war wasn't overseas anymore. It was right here in my living room, and I was about to show Derek Mitchell what real psychological warfare looked like. I waited until Jake fell into a natural sleep on my couch before making the call I'd been dreading. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I scrolled to Linda's number. 3 years of silence between us, broken only by logistics about Jake's schedule. Now I had to tell the woman who'd once been my everything that her new husband was poisoning our son. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Marcus? What's wrong? It's not your weekend. Linda, we need to talk. It's about Jake. I kept my voice level, professional. In the military, we called it tactical communication, delivering devastating news without letting emotion compromise the mission. Oh God, is he hurt? What happened? He's safe. He's here with me. But Linda, I found something. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I found Derek's prescription pills in Jake's backpack. OxyContin. Jake told me Derek's been giving them to him for months. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Linda finally spoke, her voice was ice cold. That's impossible. Linda, I'm holding the bottle right now. It has Derek's name on it, and Jake admitted, Jake's been acting out since the divorce, Marcus. You know that. He's probably stealing them and making up stories to get attention. My grip tightened on the phone. This wasn't the Linda I'd married, the woman who would have moved heaven and earth to protect our child. This was someone I didn't recognize. Are you seriously suggesting our 16-year-old son is lying about being given drugs by your husband? I'm suggesting that you've been looking for reasons to hate Derek since day one, and now you think you found one. Her voice rose, taking on that sharp edge I remembered from our worst fights. Derek loves Jake like his own son. He's been more of a father to him these past 3 years than you ever were. The words hit like shrapnel, tearing through every insecurity I'd carried since the divorce. But I pushed through the pain, focusing on what mattered. Linda, listen to yourself. I'm telling you our son is in danger, and you're defending the man who's drugging him. Derek would never. She stopped abruptly, and I heard muffled voices in the background. Derek was there, probably coaching her through this conversation. Put Derek on the phone, I said quietly. Absolutely not. You don't get to come into our home and make accusations. I'm not in your home, Linda. I'm in mine, with our son, holding evidence that your husband is giving controlled substances to a minor. Now put him on the phone, or I'm calling the police. More muffled conversation. I could hear Derek's voice, smooth and reassuring, telling Linda that I was just being vindictive, that this was typical behavior from an ex-husband who couldn't move on. The manipulation was textbook. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, make the abuser seem like the reasonable one. Marcus. Derek's voice came through the speaker, artificially calm. I understand you're upset, but let's think about this rationally. Jake's been struggling with anxiety since you and Linda split up. I've been trying to help him through some tough times. By giving him opioids? By being there when his father wasn't. The words were delivered like surgical strikes, designed for maximum damage. Jake came to me after a panic attack at school. He was scared, crying, asking why his dad chose the military over his family. I gave him one pill to help him calm down. One time, Marcus. If he's been taking more, that's not on me. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. Derek was good, very good. He'd just admitted to giving Jake drugs while simultaneously painting himself as the caring stepfather and me as the absent father. Every word was calculated to make Linda choose sides. You gave a controlled substance to a minor without parental consent or medical supervision, I said. That's a felony. Derek laughed, actually laughed. Good luck proving that, Marcus. It's your word against mine, and frankly, who do you think people will believe? The stable family man with a clean record, or the PTSD soldier with anger management issues? The line went quiet except for Linda's sharp intake of breath. She knew Derek had gone too far, revealed too much of his true nature. But she was in too deep now, had invested too much in this new life to admit she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Linda, I said, keeping my voice gentle. Please, just listen to me. Bring Jake to Dr. Harrison tomorrow for a drug test. Let's get the facts straight. We're not doing anything. Linda's voice was shaking now. And if you try to take Jake to a doctor without my consent, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. You have him for the weekend, nothing more. Mom's right, Derek added, his confidence returning. You're overstepping, Marcus. Maybe it's time we discussed supervised visitation instead. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. They were going to use this against me, paint me as the unstable father who was manufacturing drama. In family court, perception was everything, and they knew it. Fine, I said quietly. But Linda, when this all comes out, and it will, remember this conversation. Remember that I tried to tell you, and you chose to protect him instead of our son. I hung up before either of them could respond. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down, not from fear, but from pure rage. They'd just made this personal in a way they couldn't possibly understand. I looked over at Jake, still sleeping on my couch. His face was peaceful now, but I could see the toll the drugs had taken, the weight loss, the dark circles under his eyes, the pallor that spoke of a body under chemical stress. Derek thought he was dealing with a desperate ex-husband. He had no idea he'd just declared war on someone who'd spent 2 decades learning how to dismantle enemies from the inside out. Phase 1 was complete. I'd given them the chance to do the right thing, and they'd chosen to double down on their lies. Now it was time for Phase 2. Time to gather intelligence. That Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 8 years. My supervisor didn't question it. Former Special Forces operators didn't make requests lightly. While Jake was at school, I sat in my truck across from Maplewood High, watching, waiting, learning Derek's patterns. At 3:15 p.m., Derek's silver Honda pulled into the school parking lot. He wasn't there to pick up Jake. Linda always handled that. He was there for something else. I watched through my binoculars as Derek approached a group of kids near the gym entrance. Casual conversation, laughter, then something passed between hands. Quick, practiced, professional. My blood ran cold. This wasn't about helping Jake with anxiety. This was business. Derek moved to another group of students. Same routine. Another exchange. He was dealing right there on school property, hiding in plain sight as the concerned stepfather who volunteered with the youth counseling program. I photographed everything with my telephoto lens, the same equipment I'd used for reconnaissance missions overseas. Derek's license plate, his interactions, timestamps for everything. In the military, documentation meant survival. Here, it meant saving my son. Over the next 3 days, I mapped Derek's entire operation. Tuesday afternoons at the community center where he ran anxiety support groups for teenagers. Thursday evenings at the youth basketball games where he worked as a volunteer coordinator. Saturday mornings at the skate park, building relationships with vulnerable kids. Every location was perfect cover. Who would suspect the youth counselor helping troubled teens? I started following the kids Derek had contacted. Most came from broken homes, divorced parents, single mothers working multiple jobs, fathers deployed overseas like I had been. Derek was targeting the most vulnerable children in our community, the ones whose parents were too busy, too stressed, or too absent to notice the changes. On Wednesday, I watched a 15-year-old girl named Emma stumble out of Derek's counseling session at the community center. Her pupils were pinpricks, and she moved like she was walking through water, the same way Jake had looked that Saturday morning. That night, I called Emma's mother. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Marcus Chun, Jake's father. I think we need to talk about Derek Mitchell." The conversation that followed broke my heart. Emma had been struggling since her father's deployment to Iraq. Derek had offered to counsel her for free, said he specialized in helping military children cope with absent parents. He'd been giving her pills to manage her abandonment anxiety for 2 months. He said not to tell anyone, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. Said people wouldn't understand his treatment methods. Said Emma would get in trouble if anyone found out. The same manipulation, the same threats, the same systematic destruction of children while their parents remained blind to the danger. By Thursday, I had identified 6 other victims. All military kids. All dealing with trauma from divorce or deployment. All being medicated by a man with no medical license, no oversight, and no conscience. I knew I should go to the police. But I also knew how these cases played out in civilian courts. Derek was smart, careful, and connected. He'd covered his tracks well, building relationships with school administrators and community leaders. Without solid evidence, it would be his word against mine, and he'd already painted me as the unstable ex-husband with trust issues. I needed more than photographs and phone calls. I needed Derek to incriminate himself completely, publicly, undeniably. Friday afternoon, I positioned myself at Tony's Diner, the same place Jake and I had eaten breakfast the week before. Through the window, I could see the community center parking lot where Derek ran his Friday teen support group. At 4:30 p.m., Derek emerged from the building and headed straight for the diner. He always grabbed coffee after his sessions, another pattern I'd documented. He had no idea I was there, just another customer reading a newspaper in a corner booth. Derek ordered as usual, black coffee and a blueberry muffin, then made a phone call. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. "Yeah, the new shipment came in yesterday. Premium stuff. These kids won't know what hit them." He laughed at something the person on the other end said, then continued. "Military brats are the easiest targets. All that trauma, all that need for validation. Give them something that makes the pain go away, and they'll do anything to keep getting it." My hands clenched into fists under the table. He was talking about children, about my child, like they were business opportunities. The beauty is, who's going to believe them? Half their parents are deployed, the other half are too guilty about the divorce to ask hard questions. It's perfect. Derek finished his call and his coffee, then left the diner. I sat there for another 10 minutes, processing what I'd just heard. This wasn't just about drugs. This was about a predator who had identified the most vulnerable population in our community and was systematically exploiting them. That night, I made a decision that would have gotten me court-martialed if I was still active duty. I was going to take Derek down using every skill the military had taught me over 20 years of service. But I wasn't going to use violence. Violence was quick, messy, and ultimately unsatisfying. Derek had spent months psychologically manipulating children, building elaborate lies, and hiding behind his respectable facade. I was going to tear that facade down piece by piece, using the one thing Derek had no defense against, his own arrogance. It was time to set the trap. Saturday morning, I sat across from Tony Rodriguez at the same diner where I'd overheard Derek's phone call. Tony was a Marine veteran, Emma's father, recently returned from his 3rd deployment. His hands shook slightly as he stared at the photos I'd laid out on the table between us. "That son of a bitch has been drugging my daughter for 2 months. Tony's voice was barely controlled rage. "Gets worse," I said, sliding another photo across. "He's got at least 6 other kids on the same program. All military families." Tony studied the surveillance photos. Derek at the school, At the community center, exchanging pills with teenagers like he was handing out candy. Why target us specifically? Because we're easy marks, I explained. Deployed fathers, stressed mothers, kids dealing with trauma. He positioned himself as the solution to problems he helped create. I pulled out my notebook, filled with 3 weeks of surveillance data. Derek volunteers everywhere military families gather. Youth programs, school counseling, community sports. He builds trust with the kids first, then isolates them with shame and secrecy. Tony's jaw tightened. Emma's been different lately. Sleeping all the time, grades dropping, lying about where she's been. I thought it was just adjustment to me being back. That's exactly what he counts on, I said. Guilty parents who blame themselves instead of asking hard questions. Over the next hour, Tony and I developed our strategy. We needed more parents involved, more evidence, and most importantly, we needed Derek to expose himself completely. There's a parent meeting at the community center next Thursday, Tony said. Derek's supposed to give a presentation about supporting military children through family transitions. Perfect. How many parents usually attend? 20, maybe 30. Lot of single mothers, few returned vets like us. Tony's eyes hardened. You thinking what I'm thinking? I'm thinking Derek's about to have the worst day of his life. That afternoon, I visited Lisa Martinez, whose 16-year-old son Carlos had been one of Derek's first victims. Lisa worked 2 jobs as a nurse while her husband served overseas, and Carlos had been struggling with anger issues since his father deployed. Derek said the pills would help Carlos focus. Lisa explained, tears streaming down her face. He showed me articles about anxiety medication for military children. Everything seemed legitimate. Did Derek ever provide documentation? Medical referrals? Anything official? He said traditional doctors didn't understand military trauma the way he did. Said he'd studied it specifically. Lisa laughed bitterly. I was so grateful someone finally understood what Carlos was going through. I never questioned it. By Sunday evening, I had contacted 8 families. Every story was identical. Derek identified vulnerable military children, gained their trust, then began medicating them without medical supervision or parental informed consent. The pills always came from his own prescriptions, obtained from multiple doctors across 3 counties. Monday brought the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Jake called me from school, whispering into his phone during lunch break. Dad, Derek wants to meet with me after school. He says he heard you've been asking questions about him. My blood chilled. What kind of meeting? He says we need to discuss managing the situation so Mom doesn't get upset. He wants to give me extra pills to help me stay calm while things blow over. Derek was making his move, trying to silence Jake before our Thursday intervention. But he was also about to hand me exactly what I needed. Jake, listen carefully. I want you to agree to meet with him, but I'm going to be there. Not visible, but close enough to help if needed. Dad, I'm scared. I know, son. But this ends Thursday night. I promise you that. Tuesday afternoon, I positioned myself in the community center parking lot with recording equipment. Derek had chosen the perfect location for what he thought would be a private conversation with Jake. An empty classroom after hours, no witnesses, no oversight. I watched Derek arrive first, then Jake walking slowly toward the building like he was heading to his execution. Every protective instinct screamed at me to intervene immediately, but I forced myself to wait. Derek had to reveal himself completely. Through the classroom window, I watched Derek hand Jake a bottle of pills, more than he'd ever given him before. Take 3 tonight. Derek's voice carried clearly through my directional microphone. Your father's been spreading lies about me, trying to break up your family. These will help you forget about his accusations. Jake took the bottle with trembling hands. What if I get sick? Last time I took 2. I could barely wake up for school. Derek's laugh was cold, calculating. That's the point, Jake. Adults make complicated decisions that kids don't need to worry about. The pills help you not think so much about things that aren't your responsibility. But Dad says they're dangerous. Your father is jealous, Derek interrupted. He couldn't handle being deployed and having a family, so he lost both. Now he's trying to destroy what your mother and I built because he can't stand seeing her happy. I watched my son's face crumple as Derek systematically dismantled his relationship with me, using carefully crafted lies mixed with just enough truth to seem credible. Jake, your mother and I love you. But if your father keeps making accusations, we might have to consider what's best for everyone. Maybe supervised visits would be safer. Maybe it would be better if he wasn't around to confuse you. The threat was clear: keep quiet about the drugs, or lose access to both his parents. Derek was holding Jake's entire family hostage to protect his operation. That's when Jake did something that made my heart swell with pride. My son looked Derek straight in the eye and said, "I want to stop taking the pills. I want to tell Mom the truth." Derek's mask slipped completely. "You ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea what I've done for you? What I've given up to be your father?" "You're not my father," Jake said quietly. "My dad is." Derek grabbed Jake's arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Your dad is a broken-down soldier who abandoned his family. I'm the one who's been here, taking care of you, making sure you don't end up like him. I had everything I needed." Derek threatening Jake, admitting to long-term drug distribution, revealing his systematic manipulation of our entire family. Thursday's meeting would destroy him completely. But first, I had to get my son out of that room safely. I slipped through the community center's back entrance while Derek was still berating Jake. 20 years of covert operations had taught me to move like a ghost when necessary. The hallway outside the classroom was empty, giving me a clear view of Derek's escalating anger. My son was backing toward the door, clutching the pill bottle Derek had forced on him. The fear in Jake's eyes ignited something primal in my chest, but I forced myself to stay hidden. Derek needed to reveal more. "You think your daddy's coming to save you?" Derek sneered. "He's a washed-up veteran with PTSD. Nobody believes broken soldiers anymore." That's when I stepped into the doorway. "Hello, Derek." Derek spun around, his face cycling through shock, fear, and then calculated calm in 3 seconds flat. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Protecting my son." I kept my voice level, professional. "Jake, come here." Jake rushed to my side, still holding the pills. Derek watched him move, then smiled that same manipulative grin I'd seen him use on other children. "This is perfect, actually," Derek said. "Jake, tell your father how much the medication has helped you. Tell him how much better you've been feeling." Jake looked up at me, confusion and fear warring in his expression. Derek was still trying to manipulate him, even now. "It's okay, son," I said. "You don't have to pretend anymore." Derek's confidence faltered slightly. "Marcus, you're obviously upset, but let's be rational. Jake's been struggling, and I've been helping him through some tough times. That's what stepfathers do. Stepfathers don't distribute controlled substances to minors," I replied calmly. "They also don't threaten children to keep quiet about it." "I never threatened. 17 minutes of recorded conversation says otherwise." I pulled out my phone, pressing play. Derek's voice filled the room. Maybe supervised visits would be safer. Maybe it would be better if he wasn't around to confuse you. Derek's face went white. "You recorded me? That's illegal surveillance." "Actually, it's not. This is a public building, and you're discussing crimes involving my minor child. But here's what I find really interesting. You just admitted there are recordings to be concerned about. Almost like you know what you said was wrong." Derek took a step backward, his mind clearly racing. "Look, Marcus, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. We're both trying to help Jake." "No," I interrupted. "I'm trying to help Jake. You're running a drug distribution ring targeting military children." The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Derek opened his mouth to deny it, then seemed to realize how deep his hole already was. "You can't prove anything," he said finally. I smiled. "Derek, in 36 hours, you're giving a presentation to parents of military children at this same community center. Room full of people whose kids you've been drugging. What do you think happens when they see 17 minutes of you threatening my son and admitting to distributing pills?" Derek's lawyer instincts kicked in. "Those recordings are inadmissible. Any attorney would get them thrown out." "We're not going to court, Derek. Not yet. I stepped closer, letting him see something in my eyes that I'd learned to weaponize during interrogations overseas. We're going to have a community meeting. Parents talking to parents about their children's safety. Very informal. Very public. You can't do that. It's slander. It's the truth. I held up Jake's pill bottle. 17 kids. Derek. I've talked to all their families. Every single parent is going to be in that room Thursday night. Derek looked at Jake, then back at me, calculating his options. What do you want? Thursday night, 7 p.m. You show up, you confess everything to those parents, and you tell them exactly how you targeted their children. Every detail, every manipulation, every lie. And if I don't, then I release the recordings publicly, along with 3 weeks of surveillance footage showing you dealing drugs on school property. Your choice, controlled confession or total exposure. Derek's hands were shaking now. Marcus, please. Think about Linda. This will destroy her career, her reputation. You should have thought about that before you started poisoning children. I put my arm around Jake's shoulders. Thursday night, Derek. Don't make me come looking for you. We left Derek standing in that empty classroom, staring at the wreckage of his carefully constructed life. As we walked to my truck, Jake finally broke his silence. Dad, is it really over? Not yet, son, I said. But it will be soon. Thursday evening arrived like Judgment Day. The community center's main hall buzzed with nervous energy as 17 sets of parents filed in, their faces a mixture of anger, fear, and desperate hope for answers. I'd positioned myself near the back exit, watching Derek's silver Honda pull into the parking lot at exactly 6:58 p.m. He sat in his car for 3 minutes, probably gathering courage or planning his escape route. When he finally walked through those doors, every conversation stopped. The weight of 34 parental stares could crush a man's soul, and Derek felt every single one. Thank you all for coming, I said, standing up. Before we begin, I want Derek to know that this room contains the parents of every child he's been medicating. Emma Rodriguez, Carlos Martinez, Ashley Chun, no relation, Tyler Brooks, and 13 others. Derek's face went through a series of micro-expressions I'd learned to read during enemy interrogations. Denial, calculation, fear, and finally resignation. He knew the game was over, but his ego wouldn't let him surrender quietly. Marcus, this is highly inappropriate, Derek said, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. These people don't understand the complexities of treating adolescent anxiety in military families. Tony Rodriguez stood up from the front row. My daughter's been unconscious for 3 hours straight after taking your anxiety medication. Want to explain those complexities to me? Derek's composure cracked slightly. Emma's case was carefully monitored. She was experiencing severe abandonment issues. You're not a doctor, Lisa Martinez interrupted. You have no medical training, no license, no right to give my son anything. I watched Derek scan the room, looking for sympathetic faces, finding none. These parents had spent 3 days comparing notes, discovering the identical patterns of manipulation, the same lies about military trauma, the same threats about keeping quiet. Derek, I said calmly, remember our conversation Tuesday night. 17 minutes of recorded confession, 3 weeks of surveillance footage. Your choice. Explain yourself to these parents, or explain yourself to the police. Derek straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim some dignity. Fine. You want the truth? These kids were suffering. Real suffering. Anxiety, depression, behavioral issues that their parents were too busy or too guilty to address properly. The room erupted. Parents shouting questions, accusations, demands for answers. I let it continue for 30 seconds, then raised my hand for silence. Derek's going to explain his methodology, I said. How he identified targets, how he gained access, how he manipulated both children and parents. Aren't you, Derek? Derek looked around the room like a trapped animal. Every exit was blocked by angry parents. His reputation, his career, his freedom, all hanging by threads that I was systematically cutting. I helped those children, Derek said, his voice rising defensively. Military families are broken systems. Deployed fathers, overworked mothers, kids caught in the middle with no support structure. So you drugged them, Tony said flatly. I medicated them appropriately for their trauma levels. Derek was doubling down now, his narcissism overriding basic self-preservation. Pills that helped them function, helped them cope with abandonment issues their fathers created by choosing military service over family stability. The insult hit every veteran in the room like a physical blow. Derek had just attacked the foundation of our service, our sacrifice, our commitment to protecting others. Tell them about the selection process, I pressed. How you specifically targeted military children. Derek's lawyer instincts warred with his desperate need to justify his actions. The need won. Military children are already conditioned to follow authority figures. They're used to structure, discipline, taking orders without question. It makes them ideal candidates for therapeutic intervention. Therapeutic intervention? Emma's mother stood up, trembling with rage. You turned my daughter into a zombie. I gave her peace. Derek snapped, his mask finally falling away completely. All of you, sitting here judging me. Where were you when your kids were crying themselves to sleep? When they were having panic attacks at school? When they were cutting themselves because daddy chose his career over his family? The room went dead silent. Derek had just revealed the depth of his psychological manipulation, his intimate knowledge of these children's private pain, his systematic exploitation of their vulnerabilities. You studied their medical records, I said quietly. School counseling files, therapy sessions, family court documents. You researched their trauma specifically to exploit it. Derek realized too late that he'd confessed to crimes far worse than drug distribution. I was trying to help. You were predating on damaged children, I interrupted. Using their pain as ammunition against their parents, then positioning yourself as their savior. I pulled out my phone, letting him see the recording app that had been running since he walked in. Everything you've said tonight has been recorded. Every admission, every justification, every attack on these families. Derek lunged toward my phone, desperation overriding rational thought. Tony and two other fathers intercepted him, holding him back while he screamed about illegal surveillance and parental rights. Call the police, I said to Lisa Martinez. Derek Mitchell just confessed to 17 counts of distributing controlled substances to minors, plus conspiracy, child endangerment, and possession with intent to distribute. As Lisa dialed 911, Derek collapsed into a chair, the fight draining out of him completely. He'd walked into that room thinking he could manipulate his way out of trouble. Instead, he destroyed himself with his own words, his own arrogance, his own complete inability to accept responsibility. The psychological warfare was complete. Derek had been defeated not by violence or threats, but by his own toxic personality exposed under pressure. Outside, I could hear sirens approaching. The police sirens were still echoing outside when my phone rang. Linda's name flashed on the screen, and I knew Derek had made his one phone call from the back of the patrol car. Marcus, what have you done? Her voice was shattered glass, sharp and dangerous. The police just arrested Derek at some community meeting. They're saying he was dealing drugs to children. I stepped outside into the parking lot, away from the chaos inside. Linda, I need you to listen very carefully. Derek has been giving Jake opioids for 4 months. He's been doing the same thing to 16 other military children. That's impossible. Derek helps kids. He doesn't hurt them. I have recordings, Linda. Hours of surveillance footage. 17 parents who can testify to what he did to their children. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When Linda spoke again, her voice was smaller, uncertain. Jake's been different lately. Sleeping all the time, his grades. The pills, Linda. Derek was systematically drugging our son and using his position to access other vulnerable kids. I heard her car door slam, the engine starting. I'm coming to get Jake right now. Where is he? He's safe. He's with me. I paused, knowing the next words would destroy what remained of her world. Linda, Jake's been begging you for months to notice something was wrong. You chose Derek instead. Don't you dare blame me for this. But her voice cracked, and I could hear the doubt creeping in. 20 minutes later, Linda burst through the doors of the community center. Her hair was disheveled, makeup streaked with tears, nothing like the composed hospital administrator who divorced me 3 years ago. She looked around the room at the other parents, seeing their faces, their pain, their shared trauma. "Where's Jake?" she whispered. "With Tony Rodriguez in the side room. They're talking about recovery programs for military kids." Linda started toward the door, then stopped. "Marcus, tell me the truth. How bad is it?" I pulled out my phone, playing 30 seconds of Derek's recorded confession. His voice filled the space between us. Military children are already conditioned to follow authority figures, ideal candidates for therapeutic intervention. Linda's legs gave out. She grabbed the nearest chair, staring at my phone like it contained footage of her child being murdered. Which, in a way, it did. "He used Jake's anxiety about our divorce," she said, more to herself than to me. "All those sessions, all that talk about helping him cope with having an absent father. Derek targeted Jake specifically because of our situation. Divorced military family, guilt-ridden parents, traumatized kid. We were the perfect mark." Linda looked up at me with eyes full of horror and recognition. "The pills started after Jake had that panic attack at school. Derek said he could help, that he specialized in military family trauma. I was working double shifts, trying to prove I could handle everything alone. And Derek positioned himself as the solution to problems he helped create." "Oh God." Linda buried her face in her hands. "Jake tried to tell me he didn't like taking the pills. Said they made him feel weird, disconnected. I told him to trust Derek's expertise." The full weight of her betrayal was hitting her now. Our son had tried to reach out to his mother, and she'd pushed him back toward his abuser. "There's more," I said gently. "Derek's been telling Jake that you might consider limiting my visitation if I kept making trouble. He was using our son's fear of losing both parents to keep him quiet." Linda's head snapped up. "I never said that. I would never use Jake as a weapon against you. But Derek made Jake believe you would. He's been manipulating all of us, Linda, turning us against each other while he destroyed our child." Lisa Martinez approached us cautiously. "Mrs. Mitchell? I'm Lisa Martinez, Carlos's mother. I wanted to thank your ex-husband for saving our children." Linda looked at Lisa, then at me, then at the room full of parents whose children had been victimized by the man she trusted with our son's life. "How do we fix this?" she whispered. "Together," I said. "For the first time in 3 years, we worked together to help Jake heal." Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Can I see him now?" As we walked toward the side room, Linda grabbed my arm. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't listen, didn't see. We'll deal with that later. Right now, Jake needs both his parents to be strong." Through the door's window, we could see our son talking quietly with Tony Rodriguez, looking more like himself than he had in months. The fog of Derek's chemicals was finally lifting. 2 weeks later, I sat in Detective Sarah Walsh's office watching her flip through Derek's case file. The folder was 3 inches thick and growing daily as more victims came forward. 32 children, Detective Walsh said, shaking her head. Across 4 school districts. He was running the most sophisticated child exploitation ring we've seen in this county. Any word on the plea bargain? Derek's attorney withdrew it yesterday. Seems your recordings captured him admitting to federal crimes. Transporting controlled substances across state lines, conspiracy to distribute, using his position at federally funded youth programs to access victims. She smiled grimly. He's looking at 25 to life. Through her office window, I could see the courthouse where Derek's preliminary hearing was scheduled for next month. The media had picked up the story. Youth counselor drugs military children, turning our community's private nightmare into national news. The other families are holding up well, I told Detective Walsh. We've started a support group. Military parents helping each other navigate the recovery process. And Jake, getting stronger every day. Clean for 2 weeks now. He's in counseling with Dr. Harrison, a real therapist this time, not a predator in disguise. What I didn't mention was the night terrors, the guilt Jake carried about not speaking up sooner, the way he flinched every time someone mentioned Derek's name. Recovery was going to be a long road for all these kids. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Jake's school called. He made honor roll for the first time in 6 months. I showed the message to Detective Walsh. The kid's been clean from opioids for 2 weeks, and he's already getting his life back on track. Shows you what those drugs were doing to his brain. Speaking of which, Detective Walsh pulled out another file. We found Derek's supplier. Dr. Richard Hoffman runs a pain management clinic in Riverside County. Been writing fraudulent prescriptions for Derek for 8 months. How many pills? Over 2,000 OxyContin tablets. Derek was paying cash, no insurance, claiming chronic back pain from a military service injury. Her expression darkened. Derek never served a day in the military. Another lie to exploit the system. The scope of Derek's deception kept expanding. He'd researched military culture specifically to target our families, learned our language, our values, our vulnerabilities. Then he'd weaponized that knowledge against our children. The community center fired him, I said. School district banned him from all campuses. Youth Sports League revoked his volunteer status. But the damage was already done. Detective Walsh leaned back in her chair. Marcus, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've never seen a predator who understood psychological manipulation the way Derek did. Most dealers are opportunistic. They sell to whoever has money. Derek was different. He studied child psychology, researched family trauma, built elaborate cover stories. Military families were perfect targets, I said, understanding the pattern completely now. We're trained to respect authority, follow orders, trust the chain of command. Our kids inherit those same instincts. Plus the guilt factor. Deployed fathers, overworked mothers, families dealing with divorce or PTSD. Derek exploited every pressure point. My phone rang. Linda calling from the hospital where she worked. Marcus, Dr. Harrison wants to meet with both of us next week. Family therapy session with Jake. How's Jake feeling about that? Nervous, but hopeful. He keeps asking if we're going to stay together through his recovery. And what did you tell him? That his parents are going to be a team from now on, no matter what that looks like. After Linda hung up, Detective Walsh studied my face. You two working things out. We're working on being better parents to Jake. Everything else is secondary. That's probably the healthiest thing I've heard all day. She closed Derek's file. Marcus, I want you to know what you did. The way you handled this investigation, it probably saved dozens of children from becoming Derek's victims. I just protected my son. You did more than that. You could have gone to the police immediately. Let us handle it through official channels. Instead, you gathered evidence, built relationships with other families, created a support network that's still functioning 2 weeks later. That's leadership. As I left the police station, my phone buzzed with messages from other military fathers, men I'd connected with through this nightmare, who were now part of our support group. Tony Rodriguez asking about Saturday's baseball game with the kids. Lisa Martinez sharing that Carlos had been drug-free for 10 days. Emma's father sending updates from his daughter's therapy sessions. Derek had tried to isolate our families, convince us we were alone in dealing with broken children and failed marriages. Instead, his attacks had brought us together, created bonds forged in the shared experience of protecting our kids from a predator who wore the mask of a helper. The irony was perfect. Derek's greatest weapon, his understanding of military family dynamics, had become his downfall. Because he'd forgotten one crucial thing about military families. When you threaten our children, we don't just fight back. We form ranks, coordinate our response, and systematically destroy the enemy. Derek Mitchell was about to learn what happened when you declared war on an entire community of warriors protecting their young. 3 months after Derek's arrest, I stood in Dr. Harrison's waiting room with Linda, both of us nervous as teenagers on a first date. Family therapy had become our weekly ritual, the first time Linda and I had worked together on anything since our divorce. Mr. and Mrs. Dr. Harrison paused, remembering our situation. Mr. Chun and Ms. Mitchell, Jake's ready to see you now. Inside the office, our son sat cross-legged on the couch, looking healthier than he had in over a year. His eyes were clear, his color had returned, and most importantly, he was making eye contact again. Jake wants to talk about something specific today, Dr. Harrison said gently. He's been working up the courage for weeks. Jake took a deep breath. I want to testify at Derek's trial. Linda and I exchanged glances. We'd both been dreading this conversation. Son, you don't have to put yourself through that, I said. We have enough evidence to convict him without your testimony. But I want the other kids to hear it, Jake insisted. Some of them still think it's their fault. Emma keeps saying she should have told her mom sooner. Carlos thinks he's weak for trusting Derek. Dr. Harrison leaned forward. Jake, explain to your parents what we discussed about survivor advocacy. Derek made us all feel like we were the only ones, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. Like our families were the only ones broken enough to need his help. But when I saw all those parents in the community center that night, when I heard their stories, I realized Derek was lying about that too. Linda reached for Jake's hand. Sweetheart, testifying means everyone will know what happened to you. Other kids at school, teachers, people in town. They already know, Mom. It's been in the newspapers. But right now, all they know is that Derek gave us drugs. They don't know how he made us feel like it was our fault, how he turned us against our own parents. I felt a surge of pride watching my son find his voice, his strength, his sense of purpose in this nightmare. What would you want to say? I asked. Jake looked at both of us, then at Dr. Harrison. I want to tell them that Derek wasn't helping us cope with military family problems. He was creating military family problems so he could position himself as the solution. Dr. Harrison nodded approvingly. Jake's been working through the manipulation tactics Derek used. He's developing real insight into how predators operate. Derek told me Dad abandoned us by choosing the military over family, Jake continued. But Dad never abandoned us. Dad was serving his country, protecting other families. Derek took that sacrifice and twisted it into something shameful. Linda's eyes filled with tears. For 3 years, she believed some version of Derek's lies about military service, about my priorities, about our family's problems. Jake, she said softly, I'm sorry I didn't see what Derek was doing to you. I'm sorry I chose to believe him instead of trusting my instincts about my own son. Mom, Derek fooled a lot of people. That's what made him dangerous. Over the next hour, we talked through Jake's decision to testify. Dr. Harrison explained the process, the protections available for minor witnesses, the support systems in place. By the end of the session, all 3 of us were committed to Jake's choice. After therapy, we went to Tony's Diner, the same place where this nightmare had started 4 months earlier. But now it felt different, lighter, like a space we could reclaim from the trauma. Dad, Jake said over his pancakes, I want to start visiting you more often. Not because of court orders, but because I want to. What about your mom? I don't want to take time away from, actually, Linda interrupted. I've been thinking we should coordinate our schedules better. Jake needs both his parents actively involved in his recovery. I stared at her, surprised. You're okay with more visitation? Marcus, I almost lost our son because I was too proud to admit our family needed help. I'm not making that mistake again. Jake grinned, looking like the kid I remembered from before the divorce, before Derek, before everything fell apart. So we're like a team now? We're your parents, Linda said firmly. That's always been a team, even when we forgot how to act like it. That evening, I attended our weekly support group meeting at the community center. 17 military families, plus 3 more who'd come forward since Derek's arrest. We met in the same room where Derek had given his presentations about helping military children. Tony Rodriguez had become our unofficial group leader, his Marine leadership experience translating perfectly to organizing traumatized families. Updates on the kids, he announced. Emma's been clean for 12 weeks, made varsity soccer. Carlos is back in advanced placement classes. Ashley's starting a peer counseling program at her school. One by one, the success stories piled up. Children reclaiming their lives, families rebuilding trust, parents learning to recognize manipulation tactics that had made them vulnerable to predators like Derek. Marcus, Lisa Martinez called out. Any word on Derek's trial date? Next month. His attorney's trying to plea bargain down to simple drug distribution, but the DA's pushing for the full conspiracy charges. Good, Tony said grimly. 25 to life isn't enough for what he did to our kids. As the meeting ended, I realized something profound had emerged from Derek's attack on our community. These families had been isolated, struggling with military life challenges, dealing with divorce and deployment stress alone. Derek had exploited that isolation to victimize our children. But his crimes had connected us, created bonds that would outlast his prison sentence. We'd become a support network, an early warning system, a community of warriors dedicated to protecting each other's children. Derek Mitchell had set out to destroy military families. Instead, he'd made us stronger, more united, more vigilant than we'd ever been before. 6 months later, I sat in the courthouse gallery watching Derek Mitchell receive his sentence. 28 years without possibility of parole. The judge's words echoed through the packed courtroom. Mr. Mitchell, you systematically exploited the sacrifices of military families and weaponized the vulnerabilities of their children. This court finds your crimes particularly heinous due to the trust you violated and the lives you destroyed. Jake had testified 2 weeks earlier, speaking directly to Derek for the first time since that night in the community center. My son's words had been simple but devastating. You told me my dad abandoned our family by serving his country. But the only person who abandoned me was you, when you chose to poison my mind and body instead of actually helping me heal. Derek never looked up during Jake's testimony. The man who'd once commanded rooms full of parents and children now sat hunched over the defense table, a broken shell of manipulation and lies finally exposed to the light. As the courtroom emptied, Linda and I walked out together with Jake between us. Not as a reunited family, but as parents who'd learned to put their child's needs above their own pride and pain. How do you feel? Linda asked Jake. Free, he said simply. For the first time in a year, I feel completely free. That evening, our support group gathered for what had become a monthly celebration dinner. 17 families who'd started as victims had transformed into a community of healing and strength. Emma Rodriguez was heading to college on a soccer scholarship. Carlos Martinez had been accepted into a military academy prep program. Ashley Chun, no relation to me, was launching a peer counseling initiative that 3 other school districts wanted to adopt. But the real victory wasn't in our children's individual successes. It was in what we'd built together from the wreckage Derek had tried to create. Tony Rodriguez stood up, raising his coffee cup. To the kids who found their voices when the adults around them forgot how to listen. To the parents who learned that protecting our children means more than just providing for them. Lisa Martinez added. I looked around the table at faces I'd never known 6 months ago. Military families who'd been isolated in their struggles, convinced their problems were unique, their pain was shameful. Derek had exploited that isolation, but his attack had created something he never expected, a bond forged in shared trauma and mutual protection. I want to say something, Jake announced, standing up with the confidence of someone who'd found his strength in the darkest possible place. Derek told us that military families were broken, that our parents' service made us damaged goods, that we needed his pills to cope with lives that were too hard to handle sober. The room went quiet, 17 families hanging on every word from a 17-year-old who'd become their unofficial spokesperson. But Derek was wrong about everything, Jake continued. Military families aren't broken, we're resilient. We're strong enough to deploy, to move, to sacrifice, to serve something bigger than ourselves. And when someone threatens our family, we don't just fight back individually. We form ranks. We coordinate. We protect each other's children like they're our own. I felt tears forming in my eyes, watching my son articulate truths that had taken me 20 years of service to understand. Derek thought he was targeting our weaknesses, Jake said. But he accidentally revealed our greatest strength, that when military families stand together, nothing can break us. The room erupted in applause, not just for Jake's words, but for the journey we'd all taken together from victims to survivors to advocates for other families facing similar predators. Later that night, as Linda and I tucked Jake into bed at my apartment, a new arrangement where he split time equally between both homes, my son asked the question that had been haunting all of us. Dad, how do we make sure this never happens to other families? I sat down on the edge of his bed, thinking about everything we'd learned, everything we'd lost, everything we'd gained. We stay connected, son. We watch out for each other's kids. We teach parents to recognize manipulation tactics. We make sure military families never feel isolated enough for predators to exploit again. And we tell our story, Linda added from the doorway. We share what happened so other parents know what signs to look for. Jake nodded, satisfied with our answer. As Linda and I walked to the living room, she turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen since before our divorce. Genuine respect mixed with something that might have been love. Marcus, I need to say something I should have said months ago, she began. You saved our son, not just from Derek's drugs, but from a system that would have destroyed him slowly, quietly, while the adults who were supposed to protect him looked the other way. I shook my head. We saved him, Linda. All of us together. No, she insisted. You used everything the military taught you, surveillance, strategy, psychological warfare, not to destroy an enemy, but to protect a child. That's what real strength looks like. As Linda left that night, I stood in my living room looking at photos from our support group meetings, newspaper clippings about Derek's conviction, letters from other military bases where commanders were implementing new safety protocols based on our experience. Derek Mitchell had set out to exploit the sacrifices military families make in service to our country. Instead, he'd reminded us why those sacrifices matter, not just to protect freedom in abstract terms, but to ensure that children like Jake grow up in a world where predators can't hide behind positions of trust and authority. The real lesson from our nightmare wasn't about recognizing drug dealers or avoiding manipulative counselors. It was simpler and more profound. When we isolate ourselves in shame, guilt, or pride, we make our families vulnerable to those who would exploit our pain. But when we stand together, share our struggles, and protect each other's children as fiercely as we protect our own, we become unbreakable. Military families serve something greater than themselves. And sometimes, that service means fighting battles that have nothing to do with foreign enemies and everything to do with the predators who threaten our most precious treasures, our children. Derek Mitchell learned too late that when you target a military family's child, you don't just face one angry parent. You face an entire community of warriors who will use every skill, every resource, every connection to ensure justice is served and healing is possible. Jake is thriving now. Our support group has expanded to help families across 3 counties. And somewhere tonight, another military parent is tucking their child into bed, secure in the knowledge that our community stands ready to protect them from any threat that emerges from the shadows. That's the real victory. That's what makes every sacrifice worth it. This story has shown us that our greatest strength isn't in fighting alone, but in standing together when those we love are threatened. It's a reminder that predators prey on isolation, but they crumble when faced with united communities of protection. Where are you watching this story from? Share in the comments below. Are you a military family, a concerned parent, or someone who believes in protecting children from those who would exploit their vulnerability? Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe because we'll be back with more intense thriller and revenge stories that explore the depths of human resilience and the power of justice. Until our next epic tale of betrayal and redemption, Take care of each other. Watch out for each other's children. And remember, when good people stand together, evil never wins.